Morning everyone. Today we are solving quadratic equations by using the quadratic formula. So the quadratic formula is something that you're probably going to see throughout your time in math. It says the definition of the quadratic formula says the solutions of the quadratic equation ax squared plus bx equals c equals or plus c equals 0 are, now here's the quadratic formula, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c all over 2a, where a does not equal 0 and b squared minus 4ac is greater than or equal to 0. So what we're going to do is we're going to start this by figuring out what our a, b, and c are. In this case, our a comes before the x, which is 1. Our b is going to be negative 8, and our c is going to be 16. So now we just put this into our quadratic formula. X equals negative b, so we're going to have a negative 8, plus or minus the square root of negative 8 squared minus 4 times a, which is 1, and c, which is 16, all over 2 times 1. So what we'll get then is a negative 8 becomes a positive 8, plus or minus the square root of negative 8 squared is 64, minus 4 times 1 times 16, which is minus 64, all over 2. So if we do this then, we get 8 plus or minus the square root of 64 minus 64, well that's 0, over 2. Now this is plus or minus the square root of 0. So what we need to do is split this off into 2. So we'll have 8 plus the square root of 0 divided by 2, and 8 minus the square root of 0 divided by 2. 8 plus 0 is 2, 8 plus 0 is 0. Sorry, 8 plus 0 is 0, 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. 8 minus 0 is 8. 8 divided by 2 is 4. So this one only has one solution, x equals 4. Now, they are going to have two solutions sometimes. So let's try some other ones. Here we have 4x squared minus x minus 18. Our a this time is going to be 4. Our b is going to be a negative 1. And our c is going to be a negative 18. So if we put this in our quadratic formula, x equals negative b, so we're going to have a negative 1, plus or minus the square root of negative 1 squared minus 4 times 4 times negative 18, all over 2 times a, which is 4. So what we'll get then is x equals, well, negative 1 is 1, plus or minus the square root of negative 1 squared, which is 1, minus negative 4. So negative 4 times 4 times 18, equals 288. Now the 18 was negative, so negative 4 times 4 is negative 16. Negative 16 times negative 18 gives us a positive 288. All over 2 times 4, which is 8. So now we'll have x equals 1 plus or minus the square root of 289 all over 8. Now I'm going to split this off into two problems. I'll have 1 plus, now the square root of 289 is 17. So 1 plus 17 divided by 8. And 1 minus 17 divided by 8. 1 plus 17 divided by 8 is 18 divided by 8, which gives me 2.25. And 1 minus 17 gives me a negative 16 divided by 8, which gives me a negative 2. So our answers are 2.25 and negative 2. Alright, on this one we have to move over our 1. So we get 3n squared minus 5n plus 1 equals 0. Our a is going to be 3. Our b is going to be negative 5. And our c is going to equal 1. So, put this into our quadratic formula. B is negative 5 plus or minus the square root of negative 5 squared minus 4 times a, which is 3, times c, which is 1, all over 2 times 3. Alright, so a negative 5, that's going to be a positive 5, plus or minus the square root of negative 5 squared is 25, minus 4 times 3, which is 12, times 1 is still 12, so minus 12, divided by 6. I'm going to split that off into 2. 5 plus the square root of 13. Now the square root of 13, if I put that in my calculator, because that's not a perfect square, gives me 3.6 divided by 6, and then 5 minus 3.6 divided by 6. Sorry, I can't write today. Five plus 3.6 gives me 8.6 divided by 6, 1.4. And the last one, 5 minus 3.6 equals 1.4 divided by 6, gives me 0.23. So, two solutions for both of those. Now, if we check out this one, I see a lot of numbers that I can move over to the other side. The first one I'm going to move over is this 2y. And I'm going to subtract that from 3y. Then I'm going to subtract 4 from 3, so I can have ax squared plus bx plus c. So we get negative 4y squared minus 5y minus 1 equals 0. Our A is negative 4, our B is negative 5, and our C is negative 1. So x is going to equal negative 5 plus or minus the square root of negative 5 squared minus 4 times a, which is negative 4, times c, which is negative 1, over 2 times negative 4. Negative 5 is going to be 5 plus or minus the square root of negative 5 squared, which is 25, minus 4, negative 4 times negative 4 is 16, minus a negative 1 is a negative 16, divided by a negative 8. That's going to give me 5 plus or minus the square root of 9 over negative 8. So the square root of 9 is 3. So we'll have 5 plus or minus 3 divided by negative 8. So that's going to split to 5 plus 3 divided by negative 8, and 5 minus 3 divided by negative 8. 5 plus 3 is 8, divided by negative 8, x equals a negative 1. 5 minus 3 is 2, divided by negative 8. X is going to equal a negative 1 over 4. Alright, last one we're going to do today. Our A is going to be 1, our B is going to be 6, and our C is going to be 12. So x equals negative 6 plus or minus square root of 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times 12. Times 2, divided by 2 times 1. So we get x equals negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 36. Negative 4 times 1 is 4, times 12 is negative 48. 2 times 1 is 2. So we get x equals a negative 6 plus or minus the square root of a negative 12 divided by 2. Now, if I look here, I see the square root of a negative number. I know that's not possible because I can't take the square root of a negative. So I know that this problem is going to have no solution.